we're going to change this up a little bit. So, welcome to the story of Atonement, the series finale. Basically, this is going to be the last time that I ever talk about any of this stuff on my channel. And I'm excited because this is kind of where I feel like I fully atoned. And by that, I mean like I completely, in other words, finished my story. And throughout the 10 years, it was an honor to be able to do what I do best, and that is kick ass and wrestle. And to the people along the way, again, I thank everybody very much. So, different view, different setup, so you can, see some of my personality a little bit. Since 2020, I started recollecting, and again, it was kind of a habit from, COVID. So it was a nice little, tradition to, start back up and whatnot. Got myself, well over 500 video games on top of like at least 150 Funko Pops, most of which are Star Wars or, wrestling related. So, anyways, for this episode, because I don't think I'm going to talk about AWTP much. So, I think I'm going to talk about mostly some other odds and ends, like a little bit of little stuff. But anyways, let's see here. Where to begin? So, anyways, PGW ended as of Missionary 53. And there were some ideas of me coming into AWTP. We kind of, played around with the idea and stuff. So ultimately, I ended up joining for those few matches because I felt comfortable enough to wrestle again. Shane gave me my confidence back, and that was something I was hoping to do with the match with Austin, but with the whole lung collapse and all that stuff, it ended up being Shane, which honestly I think the match itself was better than what would have been me and Malik at the time. So feeling comfortable enough with my back, getting treated here and there, and I still get treated to this day. It's not like I, completely normal, because I'm not. Nobody is completely normal. But I keep myself in check. And we start these random scenarios about, give me 1 second. You might hear my mother and stuff in the background, so I do apologize for that. But anyway, so Steven and I had these random scenarios about what if you beat Zero Assault for the World Championship? And these ideas I didn't really like. And again, these were the early stages where, let's have you beat Zero Assault for the world title. Or, let's have you beat the final PGW world champion. And Steven at the time, I don't think really understood or had a plan in place for what to do with me, but I knew my end game was Malik, because again, I wanted him to be my last match, dating back to Missionary 53. But ultimately, it goes in a completely different direction. So my plan was to only wrestle 2 matches, and the matches would have been with Beerus and Malik. I wanted the match with Malik and lose, which it turned into 2 matches, which we'll get into later on, and then also the match with Beavers. And specifically, Steven wanted this match. He wanted to end this 10-year story of him and I, with me ultimately winning. And it was probably one of the best story told matches of all time. And it meant a lot to me. I didn't really appreciate it much when it happened. But looking back at it, I really am humbled and appreciative of that exact moment, because I felt like I was the guy even before a brief period. So one of the ideas, because we did bring up, like I said, winning the World Heavyweight Championship. Ultimately, it doesn't really end up happening. Some random ideas were in place. So I'm like, ooh, can I win, like, the Warriors title or something? And then Steven pitches me the AWTP Collegiate title. And I'm just like, oh. Like, I was so down about it. In the end, it worked out. But, like, I'm like, You cannot be serious. Like, I was hoping to win, like, the Warriors or, being World Heavyweight Champion one more time, especially the PGW Champion. It made me so excited. I'm like, oh my god, I'm finally going to get it. Not that I really cared to win it, but it would have been very nice to at least win it. And it made me so happy that it ended up all happening. And the idea would have been for me to win the AWTP title from Malik, because at the time, Austin wasn't doing that great in terms of wrestling and, promo skills and all that stuff. So the idea was for me to lose to Jester in a upset roll-up. And ultimately, Jester or JJ would have been the one to beat me for the collegiate title. This is what it was leading to. And ultimately, it didn't happen because JJ wasn't showing up enough. Around the late July-ish, like type of that. Around July, basically he stopped showing up a lot. Because again, JJ does not drive, and it was tough for him to get around. So at the time, we thought we could do this, and it didn't work. So that's what happened. And then ultimately, Steven wants me to win the world title. I don't know why, but I think Steven felt that I earned it from the endgame run and for what I've done. And I think ultimately for our last match to cap it off with the top prize, I was just very, again, appreciative of the opportunity. And ultimately, I would go on to become the PGW World Heavyweight Champion, becoming a 6-time world champion in the process. On top of that, there was some ways to get there, which, again, could be arguable, but at the time, was it right for Steven to dictate how Missionary 54 went? And let me explain this to you guys. So, Steven wanted to do 2 shows for the 10-year anniversary. One for AWTP, one for PGW. And basically, there were some plans that Steven didn't like because, again, this was one of my issues before coming into AWTP was I wanted Steven to book me. I did not want Austin to book me because I did not trust Austin to book me. So Steven made a call because he essentially, when it came to the second half of AWTP, Steven basically took over the entire booking. I mean, there was a few odds and ends where Austin kind of had creative control, but overall, we just didn't trust Austin. And I'm not faulting him at all. It's just that we didn't really like his booking. And I'm not accusing Austin for being a terrible booker because he most certainly isn't bad. But we just didn't trust Austin in terms of how he would, protect our characters and have, stuff like that. Which might be something that Steven talks about in his series about AWTP. And what I mean by dictate is Steven had some conditions and stuff that, were to take place. Steven wanted me and him to main event Missionary 54. One is for me to win the World Championship and to get my 10th Missionary main event, which not many people have done, which is amazing to think when you think about it. And basically, his condition was we get to main event Missionary 54. And in return, AWTP would get a finale match at Missionary 55. And that's basically what happened. Austin agreed to it, and we did that. So, again, I think it was for the best. And I'm not saying that just because I won the world title, but I mean, like, it was a good story for that part of the show. You didn't really have much stories going on in AWTP, which honestly was a very bad flaw in AWTP, where I don't think because of, we've been doing this for so long, and I think a lot of it had to do with the environment and it being completely different, where it just didn't feel right without it being in the proving grounds. And I think having me and Steven as the main event or the top match for that part of the show, it can help. And the one thing that I liked about this is the fact that I did not wrestle ever again on the PGW property. And I think that's great storytelling because that basically tells you that Scorpion, after all these years, is done with PGW. He does not want to be on the property that Steven used him on for the past 8 or 9 years. So I like that concept where we used that for me, where I would wrestle only in AWTP for those 4 matches that I did. So we get to AWTP. So where do we start from here? So basically, I confront Malik and chokeslam him. This was basically me as a character. I was just trying to be myself. And some of it, Steven could, say how I was mocking The Undertaker and all that stuff, which wasn't my intention, but, like, I just wanted to kind of show my personality and how I've adapted and evolved as a person. I went through a lot around that time period, and, like, recently graduating from college, getting the full-time job, and honestly, I felt like I made it, and 2024, in my opinion, I think was the most important year of my life, and actually, I will be more than happy to show you guys. Because you know how I've talked about it back, during Resurrection 2's build up with Anthony and how I'm like, Scorpio goes to college and all that stuff. But I feel like I made it now. And now I could go on, life and all that stuff. So, like, it just makes me very happy that I made it. I made it as a person. I feel like this bachelor's degree, especially from what I've gone through my entire life with the autism and, all that kind of stuff and struggles, with my dad and, some personal and some stuff that happened, especially with my recent breakup, it made me realize a lot of things. And it felt like 2024, I became fully genuine as a person and kind of understanding now that I'm now in the real world now. And it's a challenge. Every day could be a struggle, but all you got to do is keep fighting and fighting and fighting. It's America. It's the American dream. So, again, live your life to the fullest. So, again, that's how me and Austin happened. So, I wanted to just be Josh on camera. I was done being Scorpion. I wanted to just be Josh. And you kind of saw my attire when it came to that. And my attire basically resembles, like, my personalities and all that kind of stuff. Like, the cowboy boots and all that, for example. Like, my dad was a hunter. And I kind of wanted to resemble, and I'm not going to lie when I say this, I wanted to resemble part of my dad a little bit with that on top of, some other odds and ends, when it came to my clothing, like Nike apparel related or, my new look when it came to wrestling. Because again, I looked the same dating back to 2019. This was completely different. You had the shorts, you had the tank top, but this time you have not a muscle shirt this time. So I wanted it to be different. So basically, we do No Holds Barred, which I forgot to put that down on here. We do No Holds Barred. I forget what number it was, but we do the first match with me and Malik because at this point, Steven wants me to win the belt. But we knew we were going to go back to this, so I could end up losing to Malik. So we have this match, me and Malik, and honestly, this might be Malik's best match in AWTP outside of maybe like the triple threat or like the match he had with Steven back in May. This might have been one of his best matches up to that point because this was a struggle. And I'm not saying that because of him or me, but it was a struggle to see if this match would work because we didn't really practice. We did go over script a little bit, but there wasn't a plan like how the match would end or how we would do this. But the one thing, again, from this run in the match with Shane that saved the rest of my career was my back. And I'm saying that because my back's telling the story. And you could tell I'm selling the back, I'm doing all that, and, I kind of knew at this point these guys would have to carry me. So, overall, this was a good match. And honestly, it's up there as one of the best AWTP matches of all time. So, I was very happy and honored to finally wrestle Malik in what was a very good match. So, during that show to end it, Simba wants to make a guest appearance. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Simpa. So, anyways, we do this segment between me and Beers, and I basically say I want to challenge you at Missionary 54. And there was a line or two that I may have forgot in there, but I liked it because it showed how, yeah, I was standing up for myself, but I'm still feeling the stress and nerves of being in the ring with my cousin that in script has manipulated me throughout the years. And I kind of liked it on how it worked. So we do that build, and we didn't really do much physicality simply because I didn't want to. And I didn't think we needed to at the time. Because, again, the story speaks for itself. And I like that. You can tell a story without having to get physical. And I like that. And there was a few odds and ends, like a little, in script closure of the Kumu and all this stuff. So it all worked out for the best. And again, when it came to AWTP, I didn't really do much on screen. So there's not really much for me to talk about when it comes to AWTP outside of reviewing all these matches. So ultimately, I win the PGW World Heavyweight Championship, and I win against Beers in the main event of Missionary 54. And I was emotional. I felt like I fully atoned. I felt like I completed my journey as a wrestler, dating back to Missionary 4, when Steven attacked me and, turned on me in the Atonement. I felt like this was where the Atonement story for me ended. And it was a huge 9-year story. And again, I'm very appreciative of this. Steven didn't have to give me this main event for Missionary 54. He did not have to give me the PGW World Heavyweight Championship. Because again, after I won the world title during Endgame season, so like the HFW and the CWA world titles, that's all I really needed at this point. Like, I didn't really care much for a PGW title. And again, I was never really a PGW guy. A lot of people look at me as a CWA guy, and that's where I was most respected. Because, I went through my ups and downs when it came to respect and all that stuff. And I'm sure I still don't have much respect for what I've done. Dating back to, me being a whiner in my early CWA days to, obviously the whole Missionary 40 run. And then, my little ups and downs throughout Endgame. But again, like, I've always cared. And I feel like this was my moment to finally say that my story finally hit its peak. And again, I have nothing to say but thanks to Steven for all that. In terms of the match, I did think at one point it was my best match, but again, this is where I brought it up a few episodes ago, where it was, I think, my best match, but I still consider the Buried Alive match from Endgame season to be my best match. And the only reason why I say that is because that's still the match that most people still talk about. And again, it's no fault of Steven's or mine when it comes to why I view it this way. It's a matter of where it was on the card. And it just didn't have room to breathe. And because of it being a 2-part show, again, less than 24 hours until Missionary 55 for the actual 10-year show, it didn't have room to breathe. So you have all these other matches that go on top of the main event of 54, like, Anthony's matches from his return, obviously the match with Malik and me, and even the match of Austin and Shane as the main event of 55, which in my opinion is the greatest match of all time. Like, you have all these matches on top of that. I just don't think the match had room to breathe, and I think as a result, I don't know if many people cared for it. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but it was, if you look at it through the story, it worked, and I really much enjoyed this match. And again, I had no business beating Steven. I didn't. And the thing that saved that is not because of the back injury, but when you look at, me selling my back and being dominant most of the match, ultimately, Steven lost because he did it to himself in script, where Beerus can beat Scorpion, but Beerus, when he's in that mentality, he always loses. And basically, Beerus beat himself in this match, thinking that he could break Scorpion down, but in the end, Scorpion ends up beating Beerus because of his emotions to trying to get him down. I don't know if I worded that right, but that's how it played out. And ultimately, I tap him out to the ankle lock, which that's actually what Steven wanted to do. I don't know if it was a rub for George or... Because again, it all dates back to the end of childhood and all that stuff. And I like the idea of doing the ankle lock and, tapping him out. It meant a lot to me. And again, I can't say anything bad about it. Like, we had some great spots, like the power slam, which I actually offered to do the F5 on the pavement. I took another nasty F5 on the ground. I hit the running knee where Beers kicked out. I also did a choke slam to Steven onto the pads. What else did I do? He threw a hamburger shit in my face, or paper, or whatever it is, the wrapper for the McDonald's burger. Some low blows, some involvement with Malik. Malik trying to stop me from, losing myself, especially with the wet floor sign and all that stuff. Me almost attacking Malik, me spearing Malik. There was so much going on that everybody there was invested. And I do want to say one more thing also about this match, and I gotta say thank you to Ed for this match too. Ed made the commentary so believable and so genuine, where, again, Ed could be a dick sometimes, and I love Ed to death. And he can, sometimes not take commentary seriously, and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of that as well, but he invested himself into the story where the commentary worked throughout this entire match. So I want to thank Ed for that. But I think this, in my opinion, is my second best match outside of the Bear to Lie match, and I have no one to thank but Steven for this match. Despite it being like in the middle of everything between the start of 54 and the end of Missionary 55 and where it was placed, did not have that room to breathe, it was still what it needed to be, and I thank Steven so much for this match. It really meant a lot. And to become PGW World Heavyweight Champion, that's just the icing on the cake. I was just happy to be the world champion again, despite me having to vacate the title just because I knew my body, and script couldn't handle like a tournament like that. It's like I didn't have to do anything with the world title after I defeated Beers. It was actually his idea that I vacate the championship in script, besides the one little title defense I had with, Jester, which we get to Jester next. So somehow we get a surprise that JJ shows up to the house, and I said to Steven, can I wrestle JJ? So we ended up doing the match with me and JJ, which honestly, in my opinion, it's still a good match, but it's probably my weakest match of the 4 that I did. Just because we didn't practice again, obviously, and it went short. Match went short, but it was a good little match for JJ. I wanted to do the match with Jester, and ultimately, I retained the PGW World Heavyweight Championship, but also giving him respect at the end. It's a match that doesn't hurt JJ at all, and JJ gets to wrestle me, which, again, was a nice little opportunity for him to wrestle me, because I wanted to wrestle him, he wanted to wrestle me. We're both at the same place. This isn't ever going to happen again, so we just do the match, and ultimately, it works out. So, nice little match that JJ and I had. And finally, ultimately, on that same show, I lose to Malik, and I drop back the collegiate title to Malik to ultimately set up for his heel turn, which I'm still mixed on the AWTP finale, but just so much went wrong but right. It's so weird. I'm mixed on that match, but regardless, it set him up for that. But this was a good match, and basically showed that my back finally gave out, where Malik basically kind of took advantage of it somewhat and basically beats me with the crossroads. And again, but that was an idea of mine because, again, I wanted to show some inspiration with me being Josh on camera when it came to becoming into CWA as Stain, and also idolizing John Cena back in the day. Austin's favorite wrestler was Cody Rhodes, and still is Cody Rhodes. So I pitched the idea of losing to the Crossroads, despite it not looking like the Crossroads. He ended up still beating me with the move regardless. Um, so I have nothing but good things to say about this match too. I don't think it's as great as our first one, but it still worked. And again, all 40 matches were a success. And me losing to Malik, finally, I can say I can end my book of my career. And I'm very appreciative of the fans. If you loved me or you hated me, it was a hell of a run. And I've said it multiple times, but again, we are getting older, so it sucks. But this is where we're at now in life. Never say never, but again, sometimes we just gotta, and I've said this since 2018, and I hate saying this because it seems like I'm a dick when I say this, and again, I brought this up as to why I didn't do 41 originally, is just we needed to move on. And now I think a lot of us are starting to do that. So, again, this is where my whole run ended. And again, I want to thank Steven. I want to thank everybody else for being a part of this journey with me. It was the experience that I grew in, and I felt like I found myself a family, like a wrestling family. And despite my ups and downs, I always cared, and I always loved wrestling. And again, wrestling brought us together, despite some midget bitch that almost ruined it for me. But PGW and backyard wrestling for me was home. And all I gotta say is thank you. So this was going to be where I ended this episode, but I feel like there's a few other topics I want to talk about that I may not have discussed in the series. And this is basically like a little bonus chapter, I guess you could say, like how Steven does his. And I have a few topics that I want to kind of bring up or whatnot. Some of it I brought up already, but I kind of want to re-emphasize on a few things, despite some of my notes that I put in the description in a few of these episodes. So there is one thing I want to talk about that I'm going to start off with and kind of go from there, is why didn't one more match with Diablo not happen, especially in AWTP? I did, I think, briefly pitch the idea to Russell Austin one more time so I could lose to him, but one of the things now is it has to be, despite, the circumstances, there needs to be a story. And I don't think, and again, I view the same way now, and I think as Steven does, what's the story? There's just not a story there to do me and Austin. Even though I'm sure it would be a hell of a match, but there's just no story there unless you just say, oh, it's a dream match. But what's the story? There was just no way around that we could, figure out the story to do this match, despite me wanting to do it. And again, with Austin's limitations now since before Endgame, there's just ways that we kind of have to, be careful with him as well. It's just that there just wasn't a story there, basically. Long story short. And then I do want to discuss a few matches that were planned but never happened for reasons alone. The first thing I want to bring up is the tag team match that I did with Maniac against Cryptic and Beers in the whole Spar 13. That match was supposed to be with Diablo instead of Maniac, but he didn't show up late. Or he did show up late. The second match I want to bring up is the match of Chaotic. That all changed after the whole fiasco thing with the whole Renaissance, on top of a few odds and ends where a practice match didn't turn out well, and Steven thought he was best suited for that spot, which he was. And again, the whole Renaissance story with the whole other face thing and all that, I thought Steven was the better choice from storyline perspective. And then the whole drama at the end with the whole Billy situation with the PP stomp and all that. And then obviously this one I brought up in my notes was before the Intercontinental title run at Missionary 40, whenever I wanted to do one more title run, I pitched doing the thing with Genesis where I win the Warriors title but ultimately I lose it to Genesis at Missionary 40. That was my original idea, and then the stuff with Genesis happened, and then ultimately Steven said, what if you win the Intercontinental title instead? And the whole thing was just abandoned, where Genesis would have defeated me for the Warriors title at Missionary 40. Another match that would have happened had HFW continued would have been the Atonement versus Chaotic and his dad. Yes, Billy's dad. So, whenever we had this whole Atonement thing going from Anthony not showing up or whatnot, Steven gave himself the tag team title with me or whatnot, and we had this idea where we would wrestle Billy and his dad, where ultimately Billy and his dad Ray defeat us for the tag team titles, making Billy and Ray the first ever father and son tag team champions, where Ray would ultimately pin Steven. Again, this didn't go anywhere only because the show didn't happen because HFW continued, or did not continue, I should say. So that was going to be the plan. Like, whenever I won the tag team titles with Anthony and all that happened, that was going to be the original plan, where I was going to be dropping those tag team titles to Billy and his dad. Another thing that was going to happen if HFW continued would have been, whenever I won the HFW World title, me and Diablo would have had a 3-match series, which ultimately would lead to Diablo winning the World Heavyweight Championship from me. This probably would have been like August or September of 2020 as this continued. Another thing that happened was the tag team match that I have with RJ against Anthony and Steven for Final Judgment 4. That was supposed to be a 6-man tag with Ed and on my side with RJ, and then Shane on the other for the Saviors or the Riders, whatever they were called back then. I don't think it happened because we didn't have enough people. I could be wrong though. What are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? Anyways, my original endgame match with Z-Money was supposed to be Maniac, where I would have defeated Maniac, but we had a lot of politic issues with Maniac, and then ultimately JR Superstar, and actually it might have been JR Superstar or Maniac, it could have been one way around, I can't remember, but JR would have been Royal Champion. I would have defeated JR Superstar for the Royal title at Endgame, but then ultimately we went with Z-Money since he returned, and I basically lose because, again, unfortunately, Emma's involved, so I hate talking about this shit because that was a factor at the end of this match. But ultimately, I lose to Z-Money twice, once clean for his return, and then I lose to him again because of, making Emma my slave. Which, in real life, it was the complete opposite. I was basically her slave, which, can't wait to talk about that in a little bit again. I'm going to bury her ass again. And then finally, ultimately, the match with Malik again, his lung collapsed, so we had to go to plan B with Shane. So those were a few little things that I wanted to talk about. Now, some regrets. I have 2 regrets that I want to talk about. And obviously the first one was putting Chris Reckless over. I should have did that again on the Road to 40 or at Missionary 40, which would have been a bigger show. Or what would have been nice was drop the Intercontinental title to Chris at 40 rather than George. And again, I was a bit jealous of Chris back then. So were many others. And again, I was very egotistical, like I said at the time, where I refused to lose to anybody until I lost to George. That wasn't right. And I was pissed off back then with the whole video deletions, the whole Billy saga stuff with the Missionary 30 run. And just a lot I got into in my head. So I should have put him over there instead of Missionary 47, because ultimately Chris didn't need it and he didn't really want to do the match. But I still felt at the time, which I didn't mention at the end of the episode with during the whole Atonement for the Sins run, Chris did not need that win, but again, he was deserved of that win, and it was owed to him. And in a match where I can't go, which ultimately has repercussions in the run from Endgame, where my body can't handle some points during the first half of my run, Chris was owed. I basically gave Chris what he should have got all those years ago. And one thing that I want to talk about is I should have kept my emotions in check during my first run of Endgame. Um, I didn't mention this in the one episode about my Endgame run where my body was breaking down and my body wasn't going through, because PGW was very violent back in 2016, and that was kind of my first experience going through this on the road to Endgame. I kind of learned after the whole Black Hole Slam thing, I wasn't good for that role. And one of the issues was I wasn't having fun. And it's not just from doing all that and the losing. I blame Emma a lot for this. And again, I didn't say this in the previous video, but I'm going to say it here. She's a fucking slut. And I want to tell you guys how dirty, again, Emma really was. And again, this whole thing bites me in the ass. Oh well. I'll take it, but essentially outside of like me or Joe or like Ed, she essentially wanted to date everybody on the roster. And the way that she was acting and claiming that she would date Nick, for example, had she broken up with the other drug addict, saying all that kind of stuff, I find that to be absolutely disgusting or whatnot. Like, she's an absolute fucking pig. And again, the way that she treated me through all those years, she did not give a shit. Plus, look at this dog. She flipped you when you were a puppy, that little shit. So, it just... Again, Emma was no good for anybody in the group. She only cared about boyfriends. And she used me for that kind of shit. And it's unfortunate that she was a nasty pig that she really is. Because all she is a fucking whore. And finally, a few things or mentions. I want to mention my top 5 opponents. And you're going back out. Hopefully that's the last time I gotta do that. But my top 5 opponents. And before I go through that, I do want to bring this up too when it comes to Emma or whatnot. The whole thing, like I told you, with the whole boyfriend thing and all that, it rubbed me the wrong way or whatnot, and being around her and all that stuff, and bothered me on camera where I wasn't having fun. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I was part of the hardcore television, because Steven essentially wanted to force me to have fun, and it ended up working out in the end. It's just that Emma was a fucking useless scumbag. But anyways, my top 5 opponents. Number 5, I would have had Chaotic on it, so he's an honorable mention now because of how this run went this past year. My number 5 favorite opponent of all time is Malik. And again, Malik gave me the confidence again with Shane that I needed. And for those 2 matches, I think it worked out very well. I mean, there's spots here and there, but being in the ring with Malik could be fun. So Malik is number 5 on my list for my favorite opponents. Number 4 is Beerus. Again, we've had some good matches and bad matches, but a lot of our matches later on were very good, but you have to go back to the older matches where they weren't that great, but then each, as time passes, it just, our chemistry evolves, and I literally have the utmost respect for Steven, which, speaking of Steven, and he's helped me a lot, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today without Steven, as Beers. But speaking of him, number 3 is Leatherface. And in my mind, this is like a Kane Undertaker saga storyline. But it worked between the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. Despite me not caring for that one match, it worked. And Leatherface finally defeats me. And, the Buried Alive match, which is our last match ever. The match at Final Judgment 3, where I win the Intercontinental title. The one other side match, Final Judgment 5 and the, Junkyard Brawl. Like, there was a cool story there. And even dating back to 2016, where we had a few, interactions and all that stuff, it just felt very cool to wrestle Leatherface and his moveset compared to Beerus. And I had a lot of fun wrestling Leatherface. I'm not going to lie. So if Steven watches this, wrestling Leatherface was awesome. I wish we could have done a little bit more. I wish I could have beat his ass at least once on the road to Endgame, but I was shitty when it came to, parts of my run. Number 2 is Daniel Block. And again, despite my personal feelings towards Daniel was a huge factor in terms of my wrestling ability when it came to singles matches and how he wrestled back in CWA. I don't need to explain any more than this because, again, I have the utmost respect for Daniel as a wrestler and as an opponent. And again, I wish we could have had that one final match between him and I around 2018 or 2019. But at least we got the Royal Rumble stuff, despite me being, whatever that terms you call it. Rusty, yeah. Despite me being rusty for being in my first match in Missionary 40. And ultimately, I'm not going to explain this because there's absolutely nothing to explain but say great things about this person. My favorite opponent of all time is Shane. Zero Salt. So if he sees this, thank you so much for being a huge part of my run, despite me losing most of the time, about 95% of it, but all those matches were fantastic. I don't even think Shane and I ever had a bad match. So thank you, Shane. So Zero Assault, I'm proud to say, he's my favorite and best opponent of all time. And now my final thing I want to bring up is what's the legacy of my career and the legacy of this federation. I hate talking about this because, again, who knows? This channel may be deleted back or later on in the future, or even the PGW channel might be deleted, so it might be all gone. So luckily, we screen recorded or stole some clips for our channels or whatnot, Steven and I. But all I want to be known for is that I cared. I cared for what we did. It's just that I want my legacy. Sorry, Simba wanted to come back in here. Right, buddy? It's just that I cared about and loved professional wrestling. And I just wanted to prove that I cared and wanted to be the very best that I could possibly be. Wrestling was my home in PGW, and that's all I really want to be cared about. I don't want to be cared about my character or my matches. I just want to be known as the guy that loved doing this and cared for professional wrestling in PGW. If that's all it is, then I'm completely fine with it. So that was a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more things that I forgot to talk about, but maybe if I'm ever doing anything else when it comes to, talk segments or whatnot on the PGW channel, I might bring some more of the stuff up to kind of give you guys some more information. But otherwise, this is all I'm going to ever talk about on this channel. So I can finally turn off my laptop, and I know this episode was a bit crazy with the interruptions and all that stuff, but it's like CWA back in the day. So this was the story of Atonement. Again, I want to say thank you to all the fans and the subscribers for being a huge part of my 9-year history and being involved of 9 out of the 10 years of doing this. And again, I don't want to say I'm the greatest of all time because I'm nowhere near that, but I can comfortably say that I was one of the best. I appreciate all you guys, even if you loved me or you hated me or still do, or vice versa. I did this for you guys. And a lot for myself too, I'm not going to lie. I was probably the biggest fan of myself. I was probably the biggest fan of Scorpion, me. But I did my best to give you guys the best content on the YouTube channel for PGW, and I just want to say again, thank you. Without you guys, there's no Scorpion, there's no Ball Pumper, there's no Sheepdog, none of that. Thank you guys for watching. Maybe I'll post more in the future, who knows, but in terms of wrestling on this channel, this is it. Thank you guys for watching this series of the story of Atonement, and I feel like now I have fully atoned for my sins. Thank you guys so much.